name is Max Getuba. I am the CEO and founder of Ridgemont Africa. We are a data-driven digital marketing agency that empowers small and medium businesses by enabling them to tell their stories much more efficiently and affordably. And I'm also the founder of the Impactful Capitalists, which is a community of African changemakers that want to realize a vision of an Africa that is much more empowered economically, and we want an economy that's much more inclusive, and together we believe that small and medium enterprises are going to be the engines to create this rapid, sustainable and equitable economic development that Africa needs to uplift itself out of poverty. So yes, we emphasize SMEs because we believe that SMEs have a widespread impact on the African economy. They provide about 80% of African jobs, and what that means is having an impact on SME productivity and resilience can essentially impact 80% of African livelihoods, and we're very big on impact here. So that's the reason that we mainly focus on SMEs. We believe that these SMEs are going to be the engines for rapid, equitable and sustainable economic growth that Africa will need, as I said, to lift itself out of poverty. Ridgemont is an impact-driven business first and foremost. We believe strongly that SMEs are the engines, as I said, for rapid and sustainable economic growth as well, and equitable as well. We want an economy that's inclusive in Africa. We also believe that in order to realize this revolution, we need the right technology, the right resources, the right tools. And so Ridgemont is dedicated to producing products, services, resources, and tools that will enable SMEs to become more productive and resilient, and thus have as big of an impact as possible on the African economy. And I think it's also important to consider that 70% of SMEs are also family-owned businesses. But it's an interesting statistic because research shows that only 3% of African family wealth is actually transmitted to the second generation, and the global average is about 30%. So we are vastly underperforming in terms of transmitting family wealth from one generation to the next. As you know, a business is the most efficient way family wealth is transferred from one generation to another. And that's a big problem. So I think that Ridgemont is solving those problems. We're solving the problem of trying to create an inclusive African economy that's also sustainable, and it grows rapidly, which means that livelihoods change. We're utilizing SMEs, and as we know, 70% of these SMEs are family-owned businesses, and this will have a much bigger impact on family wealth, and that's the impact that Ridgemont is focused on at the moment, and will be focused on hopefully for the generations to come. Ridgemont is not limited to one product or service. We took a little bit of a unique approach to company building that was inspired by a book called Built to Last, which really emphasized the fact that companies that last generations are built around a mission, around values, around a culture that can be transmitted from one generation to the next. So it was very important for us at Ridgemont to design the company around our mission, our values, and our culture first, and then figure out what products and services we'd like to provide around that, so that even as time goes on, we might add on more products and services, we might invent new things, we might innovate in different ways, but the core of the company will still remain that. The Impactful Capitalists is core to this mission because the Impactful Capitalists is the way that Ridgemont communicates our values to the world and also interacts with the world through this platform. So it's a community, that doesn't just involve Ridgemont and our employees and our direct stakeholders, but it employs the community so that we can talk about our mission, we can talk about certain important issues, we can create an ecosystem of tools, resources, and technologies that users that are not limited to our company can use. Certain innovations that we develop in-house can actually be used by other companies and can inspire other people to start their own businesses and hopefully become as productive and resilient as possible in order to fulfill our mission. So we have created a variety of tools. The Impactful Capitalist is quite broad. We've created a podcast. I'll start with the resources and go to the tools. With the resources, we've created a podcast, we've created a newsletter, various channels on YouTube and social media that give materials that we believe are important so that people can understand more about business, understand more about economic matters. We've also created tools, AI tools, like tools on financial modeling, tools on a marketing compass, investment, capital allocation. These are basic skills that will enable businesses to become much more productive once they start thinking about their business in a much more scientific way. So these tools are very easy to use, they're seamless, and as I said, we're using artificial intelligence, so it's very easy for the users to have a personalized experience, to put in the data that's specific to their business and essentially get the result that they want. So we have invested a lot in that, and I'm confident that we're going to invest much more in tools and resources of that kind in the future. Initially, I started off in medical school. Actually, I always thought I was meant to be a medical doctor, but in the middle of my studies, about 1.5 years in, I decided to leave that path. I decided that my path needed to change. I felt like I needed a more unique path that I would define for myself. I felt like the medical field, as impactful as it is, and as much as I respect all the professionals working there, it was a bit too rigid for me. I needed a little bit more space to experiment, to build new things, and that journey led me to essentially leave medical school. A pretty controversial decision at the time, with a lot of family and the community as a whole, but eventually they saw that my decision to leave and join the African Leadership University to pursue entrepreneurship was actually for the best. It was where I felt, home was. I felt at home pursuing entrepreneurship, building new things, taking on new challenges and risks, and meeting like-minded people as well. So entrepreneurship sort of came into my life unexpectedly. I just graduated from the African Leadership University with first class honors, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have gone to the African Leadership University. It had been a dream of mine, and I was actually privileged to meet the founder of the African Leadership Group and interact with him a little bit, Dr. Fred Swanika, and he is an extremely impressive individual and somebody I look up to, so I wasn't disappointed, and I'm glad that I got that opportunity as well. But the African Leadership University in particular has been impactful in my journey because it forced us not just to dare to dream, but to be accountable to ourselves for those dreams. We had to build things and show that we built things that actually have an impact on society, and that played a role into how we were graded. It played a role into our academic progress, and I thought that was a very novel idea, and it was a beautiful thing because it gives you the permission to try things, but also the permission to fail. And that's a very important aspect of education in my view, because a lot of other traditional economic educational institutions, have a challenge because they never allow people to fail. To sometimes having that permission to fail enables an individual to grow as long as you give it your best in ways that traditional educational systems don't provide, with traditional exams and things like that. And the African Leadership University really emphasizes that whatever you do, even if you fail, you have to try, you have to take the risk, you have to put yourself in the mix and have skin in the game, and that's a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful that I went to the African Leadership University. I'm grateful for the first class. I credit that to all the great mentors and teachers that I had along the way. And yes. Failure has been extremely important in our journey building Ridgemont, and that's because we have been through many products, many services, many experiments in many different fields that have enabled us to have a very unique approach to product development, to marketing, to building a company in the African context. And I'm very grateful for that. For example, we started off in the traditional technology space. We were trying to have a traditional technology startup. The first idea was in health tech. We were trying to create an insurtech product that would essentially help older people and people with chronic illnesses to get access to affordable insurance. We were trying to develop that technology that would help de-risk clients like that for insurance companies much more, objectively, and with at the minute level, so that we could understand every single factor that plays a role in their health and get them cheaper insurance. But I quickly learned that it was an impossible task, just because health tech is heavily regulated, and it's also very expensive. So I had a friend who built a startup there, and his experiences just, they showed me that I had made the right decision in moving on to something else. We've also tried agri-tech, where we essentially try to make this forever digital expo online, where suppliers and buyers could access high quality produce without having to go through middlemen, and we build the technology for that. But we also realized that was heavily regulated in Kenya. It's very hard to do certain things like quality assurances at scale. So we quickly realized that also didn't work. And we also did a prop tech product in real estate, where the idea was to create a buyer-centric platform that would really personalize the experience of purchasing real estate from the side of the buyers. I think a lot of the platforms on the market really focus on the sellers, and they show their inventory, but they don't really focus on buyers, their needs, information that they should have. So we tried to build a product around that, and we did. And the product was good, but we couldn't scale it enough to justify further investment in it. So we also had to kick it to the curb at that time. So as you can see, we had so many experiments that we started with, and they were not all successful, but each of them brought valuable lessons for us. We actually also dabbled in agricultural real estate, which we thought had a very interesting case in Africa. We thought that agricultural land was undervalued. We also thought that we had a big problem in terms of the structure of agriculture in Africa, because majority of agriculture is run by small scale farmers, which is a good thing. I mean, it provides livelihoods for millions of people. However, we have a productivity problem in agriculture as well, and part of it, I think, is because since much of it is run at small scale, it's hard to apply the very expensive technologies that a lot of other places in the world apply to Africa, because a lot of these technologies are very expensive. They need to be applied at scale to justify those unit economics, and agriculture essentially runs on economies of scale. So I thought that small scale problem needed to be solved in a much more efficient way. So we thought that a vehicle like a REIT, an agricultural REIT, which is a real estate investment trust, could maybe allow investors to raise the capital necessary to buy very large pieces of land and develop them so that farmers could maybe rent that land out and add value on it, develop it into a viable investment like other economies like the US where that happens. However, there are certain problems with that. Like in the US, you'd find that the interest rates for loans are much cheaper, so farmers can take loans at much cheaper rates, single digit rates, and they can develop this agricultural land even if they don't own it, and create a viable business out of it. However, here in Kenya and Africa as a whole, we have a problem with very high interest rates. The average is about 20%, and that means the cost of capital is far too expensive to make that idea viable, at least in that form. And also governments need to invest much more in infrastructure and amenities closer to agricultural hubs, which still hasn't happened in many places around the continent. I can speak particularly for Kenya. Many places still don't have that access, and that creates a huge problem when it comes to investing seriously and heavily in agriculture as of now. So those are some of the challenges that we faced in other industries. Ridgemont is focused on small and medium enterprises. So we wanted to understand firsthand what a very common kind of small and medium enterprise in Kenya, what that experience is like running one. So we entered the space of retail, which it's a commodity business. It's not something I'd usually do, but the opportunity was a little bit more interesting because there wasn't that much competition around. So I decided to invest in it just to see and experiment, and really determine that if we could essentially do everything right, use our skills in data analysis, in technology development, if we could apply everything we had and tried to make this small tuck shop work, would it really make a difference? So we created state-of-the-art inventory management systems and ordering systems and everything you could optimize, we optimized. Financial modeling systems and so on and so forth. Operational systems and everything was running seamlessly. The technology was good, but we found that there was a huge challenge in justifying a lot of the investments we'd like to make, because it was hard to scale that business because the margins are so small. Loans, the cost of capital is it's very expensive in Kenya and Africa, as I've mentioned. So it was a very difficult process leveraging what we had to create a much more profitable business or increase the margins. You can't really creatively increase the margins on a small tuck shop at that scale. You would need scale in order to run a retail operation and create, let's say, a Walmart. But people like Sam Walton, who started Walmart, relied heavily on debt and, as we said, the cost of capital in Africa it's a bit too expensive. So at the end of the day, it just broke down for us because the unit economics didn't make sense and it just wasn't worth our while. But we learned a lot as well, just about the challenges of small and medium businesses and some of the solutions that need to be explored, whether it's in the private sector and in the public sector, which was a big thing. We realized that public sector reform is actually very important to the success of small and medium businesses. So we cannot ignore that. We can't just create technology and resources in this ecosystem and also not talk about public policy and economic structures, economic ideas, because all these things are important in order for us to essentially uplift all small and medium businesses, family businesses, and create the Africa that we want to create. The failures, they taught me how to approach building a business in the African context. In the beginning, I sort of had certain assumptions about building products and building and developing technology. But once you're in the market, once you have real skin in the game, once you take those risks, you realize that a lot of the ideas that you might expect will work from other markets are just not practical for Africa. Africa is an entirely different beast. So I learned how to develop products, to develop appropriate technologies for Africa and appropriate business models and appropriate, let's say businesses that have the right unit economics, the right financial models that would make sense in the African context, to make them sustainable and to make them grow steadily but much more safely. Because in Africa, things might be a bit more, tumultuous to say the least. So it's important to understand every single facet of the market. And we learned how to understand markets, product development, technology development, and everything in between. So I'm grateful for all the losses and failures. So the systems we have are extremely important to how we run Ridgemont. I say that we are, but it's hard to find a business at this scale that I feel is as well run as we are. And that's just because we have invested in empowering our team and our employees with information that enables them to solve the problems they need to solve whenever they need to solve them. So, for example, we've created an internal company application that has a training handbook that enables them to understand our core values, our mission, what we're really about, just in case they've forgotten or they're confused about a decision and the direction we'd like to take. Also, it describes our products, our approaches on things. It enables them to get upskilled on various skills that we've mastered, so that it's a much more seamless process. We have databases for client relations and new projects, campaigns, products that we have in the market that we're experimenting with, and some of the failures that we've also experienced, just so that everyone in the company has the information they need to solve every problem that comes to them. So it's a much more seamless way of designing a company around information, making sure that we have a singular brain and we're a team that understands that brain, and every single team member is essentially one part of the body, and we can work in a coordinated fashion and create the best value for our customers and our users and our audiences as well. We broke into the digital marketing space primarily because initially we had worked on marketing consultancy for a while for certain clients, and it had been a fulfilling process working on consulting for them. However, the thing about consulting is that when you do a good job for your client, you find that you actually lose the business faster, right? So we delivered on all our deliverables very fast, efficiently, and well. And you found that a lot of our clients now said they didn't need our services anymore. And that sort of caused an internal crisis because we needed that cash to essentially build out the rest of the products and services that we were working on and experimenting with. So I had to essentially, come to myself and ask myself a certain question. Is this really what I wanted Ridgemont to be doing? Is this what I started Ridgemont for? We're losing these clients. It was hard to find new clients in that field, but I had to really go back to our mission, our values, and our culture, what we developed, and think about an approach that would be more appropriate and reflect those values a lot more. So we essentially decided to tear everything down that we'd produced before and essentially rebuild the company from scratch as a digital marketing agency that is data driven. And so this is the Ridgemont that we have today. Briefly after medical school, I had a stint where I decided to do a film, or to actually made 2 films, and that was sort of a passion project. And I had no money, had no resources, had no connections, had no reason to actually create a film, or potentially be successful at doing so. But I decided to do it anyway, just to challenge myself, and because I'm stubborn. And that's something that I still have today. So the film making process was extremely hard, extremely tedious. I have a lot of respect for filmmakers, and it taught me a lot just about product development, about marketing, about digital media, and storytelling, and so many different things that I never expected to learn. And how that played a role in what we did eventually in digital marketing was that it enabled me to know how to produce high quality work at much lower budgets than traditional production companies could, and to align the needs of a project to the budget that you have. So not just to quote things on a base case scenario where you'd say that uh, I would need the best equipment and the best crew and the best this in order to realize your vision. I would say that, look, I understand your resources are limited. I can design around that. And that's a very valuable thing for what we are currently doing now. And it changes the game completely. I think it gives us a much bigger advantage in approaching the market as we approach it now. So it just reminds me of this thing that Steve Jobs once did, which was he went for a calligraphy class in university before he dropped out. And he just went out of passion and curiosity. And, there was no other reason to go to a calligraphy class. It was not part of his curriculum, but he did it anyway. And eventually, the calligraphy class contributed to the Macintosh computer having different fonts. And that was a huge feature when the Macintosh computer came out. It was a huge innovation. And he said that some of these experiences, when you do certain things for yourself, you challenge yourself in different ways, you experience different things, and you put yourself out there in terms of learning and education, just following your curiosity. A lot of those experiences will come back to enrich your life in ways that you would not expect. So for me, that was this moment where the experiences in filmmaking, small filmmaking, essentially enable me to develop this product in a much more effective way years later. The three main insights that I have in mind are: the first one is do new things, try to do new things. In this age of artificial intelligence, we have all the information in the world at our fingertips. So everything that's been done, that's been discovered, is already at our fingertips. So it gives us this opportunity to build new things and try new things that have never been tried before. And I think that's a huge opportunity, not just in entrepreneurship, but also in art, in science, and in any field really, academia, any field that you're in. Just, I think everyone should try to push boundaries and make new discoveries and push the human race forward. Yeah, I think that's probably the first insight I would have. Second insight would be learn how to take risks. A lot of the educational system is built around de-risking. What decisions can you make to de-risk? Make sure that whatever decision you make, you're assured of something, right? But the risk of failure a lot of times actually pushes people to create creative solutions to problems. So I think that the biggest risk, in my opinion, is to not risk anything at all. I think that taking smart risks is far more valuable for anyone in their own journey, because as we know, capitalism is really built around risk. It rewards risk takers, not necessarily the smartest people or the most ambitious or the most creative or whatever it is. You have to take risk in order to have a chance of standing out in this capitalist system. And the last thing is, the job of a creative person is to create. It's not necessarily to determine an outcome. Nobody can control the outcome of anything. And that's something that's also core to our company here at Ridgemont, is that we have the spirit of experimentation, of trying things. It doesn't matter if they're stupid. It doesn't matter if they sound like they'll be a bad idea. The thing is, a good idea is only good if it works. That's it. A good idea is only good if it works. But you wouldn't know that it's a good idea unless you try. Because a lot of times, no one can predict the future. No one has that ability. So as a creative person, it's important to understand that your job is to create things. So focus on the process, not on the outcome, and learn to love that. Learn to love the process of creating new things, experimenting, and putting yourself out there in different ways. And eventually you are likely to discover something that's undervalued in society, that you in particular can provide for society or solve for society. And that becomes a very valuable thing, economically speaking, and in many other ways. So I think that's something that I would leave you with as well. I was accepted into the Holt International Business School in Boston, Massachusetts, and I am so grateful to the team there at Holt, who have, really convinced me that their institution is a world-class institution that promotes creativity, entrepreneurship, and impact-led thinking. And so I thought that Holt was the logical next step, just because they're also an impact-driven institution. They have world-class resources, experts, and I thought that I could certainly learn so much from them and their experiences in their network, but I could also contribute to their network in a much more effective way than I would in other schools that are a bit more traditional, because our values align. So we're big on impact, and I'm really excited to pursue this next phase of my master's at Holt. So I'd like to thank the team at Holt for allowing me to join the institution. Ridgemont is gonna keep running. We have a great team, we have great systems, great products, and great customers as well. So our current products are going to keep running. Our initiatives with the impactful capitalists will also keep running. I will run a lot of them remotely, but the team here on the ground are going to hold the fort, and they're going to keep executing at the highest level, because our culture is built around excellence, it's built around integrity, and I believe in what we are doing and the people who are realizing our vision